Early voting is now underway in the preliminary election for the Boston City Council after a stretch marked by conflict and controversy. 3 members of the council's progressive bloc are fighting to keep their jobs, including Ricardo Arroyo, who's been dogged by controversy since running for Suffolk DA last year, and Kendra Lara, who's facing criminal charges after crashing a car into a Jamaica plane home. All this at a time when the climate on the council has been especially toxic, with City Council President Ed Flynn calling for new anti-bullying rules for the body. So what are the biggest storylines to watch when voters head to the polls next week? I'm joined now by former Bay State Banner senior editor Yawu Miller and by Gin Dumcius, current managing editor for the Dorchester Reporter. Always terrific to see both of you. Thanks for being here. Gin, the 3 incumbents, Ricardo Arroyo, Kendra Lara, and Tania Fernandes Anderson, who represents District 7, how vulnerable do you see them as a group?
Well, I think you've seen some of the endorsements stack up, and some of the supporters have not abandoned them despite all those ethics issues and the car crash. And so I think the expectation is probably for Arroyo to make it through to the final. And the question I think on a lot of people's minds is who's going to be the number 2 in this in these races? How many votes do they get? And what happens after that. So
just to be clear, you expect Arroyo to make it through as the top vote getter?
It's possible, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and how about for Lara and Fernandes Anderson? I should mention, by the way, Fernandes Anderson pleaded, I was going to say pleaded guilty, that's the wrong terminology. She admitted or acknowledged an ethics violation earlier this year for hiring her son and sister to work for her in City Hall, which you're not supposed to do. She paid a fine. Ricardo Arroyo had seen allegations of sexual assault dating back to his teen years surface when he ran for Suffolk DA. He was never charged in those cases. And also there were questions raised about his communications with Rachel Rollins, the former U.S. attorney from Massachusetts. He was nudging her as he ran for DA to take action that would benefit his campaign.
Out and out, encouraging.
Okay. What about you? What's your sense of this threesome, how vulnerable they are?
I mean, I think Lara is the one who has the race that people are seeing is closest. That she has two opponents, both of whom are being backed by other city councilors. I think
we should say their names. There's so much info to get in. Enrique Pepin, who is backed by Michelle Wu.
Mayor Michelle Wu, and then you have
Jose Ruiz.
I'm sorry, these are the Arroyo opponents. Yeah, they're backed by Jose Ruiz is being backed by Martin Walsh.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so I mean, I think it's kind of unprecedented to see these many endorsements from councilors and mayors in city council races. Not really seen this before, but I think what we're looking at is somewhat of a white backlash against a council that's become majority people of color, majority women, and has leaned way more progressive than it has anywhere in the last 50 years.
Let me ask you about that backlash issue. And since I screwed it up and since I conflated the races, let's talk about the challengers to Lara. You have Ben Weber, who's a white man, seen as a progressive candidate, labor attorney, and then William King, an IT director. He's a person of color who's been backed by some of the white councilors, more conservative councilors. Am I getting that right, getting those details right?
And Ginn can suss out, like, there's also PAC money, super PAC money that's coming in, which is also unprecedented for a city council race. And these interventions, again, look very much like, let's take Boston back to where it was before, it was a majority people of color city, before the elected officials represented that.
Talk a bit about the outside money that is floating around out there. Who's looking to influence these races, and how are they doing it?
So there's a couple of super PACs that have formed, and typically in Massachusetts, super PACs are formed by funded by 2 types, and one is wealthy individuals, and the other is unions. And in this case, the most active super PAC is one that's trying to get involved in the District 3 race, District 5, and District 6. Which is
funded by Jim Davis, the New Balance chairman.
New Balance chairman. And that he also spent over $1 million trying to defeat Mayor Wu and boost Anissa Sabi-George in the 2021 race. And also had George Regan as a PR consultant. We're going to see how much impact the super PAC is going to have. I would say it's definitely a new development, but it's not unexpected. I mean, super PACs have now been around for over a decade, and I think you're going to see this. If we go to an elected school committee, you're going to see super PACs in school committee races. So it's unprecedented, but not unexpected.
Could you see that super PAC activity creating a backlash? I mean, and I need to be careful here because I've already mixed up the races and potentially confused viewers. I don't want to do it again. In the case of the Kendra Lara race, if I remember correctly, that super PAC has been spending money on advertising and campaign communications for both of her opponents, correct? So I could imagine some voters in that district saying, hey, wait a minute, this just doesn't seem fair. They're out to get her. Could you see that redounding to her benefit?
It's possible. I mean, Ben Weber, I believe, in a statement said it was bonkers that this money was coming towards him and King, and he was very bothered by it. I think we'll see in terms of, if you're talking to the average voter and what a super PAC is, what it means, I think there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of mystique about them. So it's unclear what kind of effect they're going to have.
Yeah, well, I want to ask you a little more about your idea that there's a white backlash brewing here. In some of these races, for example, in the Arroyo race, you've got people of color running against him who are
and
big.
With Lara, too.
And with Lara, yeah. So I could imagine some people who don't want to see Arroyo or Lara reelected hearing your comments and saying, no, this isn't about racial animus or racial backlash. This is about people who have been publicly accused of doing things that we just don't think councilors should be doing, that are beyond the pale, and we need new voices. What would your response be?
I would say that over the decades, you've seen councilors, violate ethics laws. More recently, we've seen, 4 councilors back a lawsuit against the city. Did they file ethics reports saying that they're basically backing a lawsuit against the redistricting lawsuit, against the council?
White councilors suing.
Yeah. It was like it's the same quartet that you see all these 9-4 splits in the votes, and you're seeing councilors Flynn, Murphy,
Flaherty,
Baker, right, who represent South Boston and the most conservative precincts in Dorchester. And, I think in decades past, you had, a majority conservative white male council, majority Irish American council. Yep. And now there's just 4 of them. And so I think Baker and Murphy hosted a fundraiser for William King. He's African American. He leans conservative. He backs the police, whereas Lara and Arroyo have said they want to reduce the police budget, increase funding for crime prevention rather than policing. So, those are the lines that you're seeing the split on. It's more ideological than racial, but race plays a role in it.
Okay. Again, what is Marty Walsh, the former mayor, up to in this contest?
Well, when I spoke to him he endorsed John Fitzgerald in District 3.
This is Frank Baker's district.
Frank Baker's
conservative firebrand on the council who's stepping down.
And a childhood friend of Walsh. Walsh told me that he would be endorsing others down the road, and I think that the expectation was that he would be endorsing Jose Ruiz, who the 2 of them are close. I think, as you've seen in a history of Marty Walsh endorsements, a lot of it comes down to it's the personal connection. It's how long they've known each other or the family members.
And Ruiz, who's running against Ricardo Arroyo, he was on the Dignitary Protection Unit for Walsh in City Hall, right? But he's also a more moderate Democrat, right? Akin to Walsh, more of a centrist. 30 years as a Boston police officer, more pro-police certainly than I think people would say Ricardo Arroyo is.
Well, I would say in terms of, this is the within City Hall, it's multi-layered, right? So it's racial, generational, and also in terms of where people fall in their politics. And within the political sphere, you've definitely got the moderate to conservative bloc. You've got the progressive bloc that includes Arroyo, Lara, Fernandes, Anderson, Mejia, and then you've got that another progressive bloc. I don't know if pragmatic is the right term, but it's Brucey Louisiane, it's Brian Worrell, it's Gabriela Coletta.
A little more in line with Mayor Wu, right?
More in line with Mayor Wu, and I think that's I think some of the councilors in that progressive bloc with Louisiane and others are trying to expand their bloc. So I think that's kind of that dynamic in play here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so complicated and fascinating as you break it down that way. Yawu, in District 5, where former Mayor Marty Walsh has endorsed Jose Ruiz, we've got Mayor Michelle Wu endorsing her former neighborhood services head, Enrique Pepin. Does it matter who wins this clash of surrogate candidates? I'm fascinated by the Walsh-Wu dynamic, but I can be a superficial person. Do you think it's significant who prevails there?
I don't. Yeah, I don't know that the voters are really going to. How much does a mayoral endorsement matter in a city council race? I mean, historically, when you've seen Menino or Walsh weigh in, it hasn't necessarily moved the needle. Appeared to move the needle much. Yep. Particularly when it comes to trying to unseat a sitting councilor, when it's happened in the past, it's not been, terribly effective. It remains to be seen. I think everybody's going to be watching that race, sort of wanting to see how that comes out. It's a test of Wu's influence. Can she get Pepin into the number 2 slot or the number 1 slot? Okay.
Any predictions that you want to hazard before we wrap up here?
I'm very bad at predictions, so no.
It's probably smart to blame. How about you, Yawu?
I've not put money on any of these candidates, but I think that we'll see Arroyo in the preliminary. Make it past the preliminary. I think it's safe, and I think that Tania Fernandes Anderson. I mean, she's running against perennial candidates, so she'll do well. Lara's is the one that everybody's watching.
All right, Yawu Miller, Gin Dumcius, thank you for being here.
Thank you.